At least 5 ladies could assist Liam Spencer, Scott Clifton, have a romantic new beginning, according to spoilers for The Bold and the Beautiful, B&B. Having established that Liam will survive, it is prudent to begin considering what his future holds. Since Liam is starting a new chapter in his life, he will eventually meet a romantic interest. Let's discuss Liam's possible partners and who he might meet up with in the upcoming months. 1. Hope. As long as Hope Logan Annika Noel is alive, Liam will always have the chance to date her. Even though Hope and Carter Walton, played by Lawrence St. Victor, are now together, it's difficult to think that their romance will last. When Hope believed Carter was dying, Liam encouraged him to get back together, but he may alter his mind now that he should have many years remaining. Perhaps Liam might win Hope back and start again with their family and Beth Spencer, Jordan Gracie. 2. Since she has consistently shown how much she still feels for Liam, Ivy Forrester, Ashley Brewer, is an additional choice for him. If B&B wishes to produce this throwback combination, Liam and Ivy may rekindle their romance in the upcoming months. 3. Daphne Rose Muriel Hilaire is now obsessed with Daphne Carter, but it could be intriguing if the show examined her relationship with Liam. Perhaps Liam and Daphne could become friends if he begins to yearn for Hope, much as she does for Carter. There may be a chance for some unexpected flying sparks if you communicate. If Hope becomes so determined to keep her adversary away from Carter, she may even think of acting as a matchmaker for Liam and Daphne. Although there is no assurance that Daphne and Liam would make a good couple, B&B could at least try them out and see how things go. 4. Steffi Jacqueline McInnes Wood's character Steffi Forrester just left town with the kids in order to get some fresh air, but she will return once Wood's maternity leave is up. A romantic reunion between Steffi and Liam is always possible since their love will endure. Perhaps the series will revisit Liam and Steffi's romance if Luna Nozawa's, Lisa Yamada, survival tears up Steffi and John Finnegan's, Tanner Novlin marriage in the future. 5. A fresh face on the canvas. Naturally, a lot of viewers are hoping that the CBS serial opera will introduce Liam a new romantic interest. Maybe it's time to give Liam a new starring woman and introduce someone else. Now that he's awake, everyone will be watching miracle patient Liam Spencer, Scott Clifton, on The Bold and the Beautiful next week. However, Don Diamond's character Bill Spencer might begin to notice that something is quite off with his son. Is Liam Spencer's death imminent? Below are spoilers for what will happen next on B&B. The lies of Grace Buckingham were exposed. There is clearly a significant problem with Dr. Grace Buckingham, Cassandra Creech, on The Bold and the Beautiful. On social media, there is a widely held belief that Grace lied and gave Liam a clean bill of health after taking Bill's $1 million without ever actually removing the tumor. If so, the truth will eventually surface and Liam's friends and family will receive the heartbreaking news. Bill Spencer hurried to the hospital to save the day after learning that Liam had been shot and was battling cancer. $1 bill paid Grace right away to save his kid, but he never received information concerning Liam's tumor or a second opinion. When Bill opened his checkbook, the inoperable tumor became suddenly operable, which is very convenient. Bold and Beautiful spoilers indicate that Bill will begin to suspect him next week. It seems that Liam's recovery is taking longer than his father had anticipated. It won't be long until Bill begins introducing new physicians who specialize in his cancer condition through the Spencer mansion. Since money is not an option, Bill Spencer discovers the reality if Grace staged Liam's surgery. Bill Spencer will discover it, and she may want to leave Los Angeles before he can catch her. Imagine celebrating your son's new lease on life after spending $1 million to save him, only to discover that he is still dying. Finding clarity in the rhythmic crash of waves below, Liam Spencer stood at the edge of the cliff overlooking the Pacific, the same location he had visited so many times before. He was unaware of the wind whipping his hair across his forehead. His thoughts were elsewhere, dispersed, shattered, and tugged in 5 different directions. Each of the 5 women carries a unique fragment of his past, present, and perhaps, if he had the courage to believe again, his future. It had never occurred to him that love could be so complex. Or perhaps it was him, not love, that was problematic. He was no longer sure what he even wanted after years of vacillating between feelings, decisions, allegiance, remorse, and desire. But he had finally reached a point in his life when he was prepared to make the correct decision, free from fear or duty. He desired a romantic new beginning. With whom was the question? Logan was the obvious pick, I hope. She had been his first real love, the one who loved him for who he was beneath the doubt, seeing past his name and his father's reputation. Betrayals, losses, reunions, and all the suffering in between had all been part of their bond's enduring strength. He had genuinely thought they were meant to be together forever at one point. However, even eternity had a limit when uncertainty and scars were too much. Despite her gentleness, grace, compassion, and quiet strength, Liam had shattered her heart more times than he could remember. Hope was left to put herself back together each time he veered off course or stumbled. Something had changed in Steffi's eyes the last time he'd kissed her and lied about it. Not quite rage, but a sort of sadness that didn't recover as quickly. He often questioned whether he was standing in a house with a cracked foundation, even though they had made an effort to restore. Would she ever be able to trust him as she once did? Could he really believe he wouldn't let her down again? Then Steffi came along. Steffi had been the fire if hope had been his anchor. She pushed him, challenged him, and sparked an exciting and risky side in him. Love with Steffi was turbulent, never steady. Even when it resulted in catastrophe, their magnetic attraction to one another defied reason. Even if they weren't together, Steffi, the mother of his first kid, would always be family. However, love was not the same as family. Was it, though? The distinction had always been hazy, which was the issue. Steffi had a complex past of her own, complete with flaws and mistakes. She was now establishing a life with Finn, who had never treated her like a backup like Liam did. Could he truly anticipate anything different when he returned to her world? Or, despite his incessant need to knock again, was that door quietly closing? Nevertheless, there were times when Steffi glanced at him and something flickered. Tender, vulnerable moments. Perhaps a memory, or want, or remorse. He was unable to tell. However, he wasn't sure if he wanted to be the one to ask her to make another decision. Perhaps it was time to let her live in peace, even if it meant letting go of a relationship that had once seemed inevitable. Ivy Forrester followed. He hadn't seen her in a long time, but he was startled by the ease with which they interacted when he ran into her at a recent Forrester event. While their time together had been brief, it had also been straightforward, and Ivy had always been nice to him, honest maybe to a fault. Years of emotional harm were absent, as was the triangle. In a tempest of confusion, two people are searching for something straightforward. He thought of how Ivy had looked at him then, with a firmness that gave him a sense of security and optimism in her gaze. She appeared more grounded than ever when she returned to Los Angeles. After that incident, they had gone for coffee, and he had laughed unreservedly for the first time in years. She didn't push, didn't criticize him for his background, and just listen without interjecting. She simply was centered, peaceful, and self-assured. Was she the reset button he was looking for? Not a comeback, not a rebound, but a genuine, deliberate decision? A fresh start with a person who recognized his ability despite knowing who he was? There was Paris Buckingham, of course. Their chats had taken him by surprise, even though she had just lately made a significant impact on his life, primarily through connections they shared. She was astute, determined, sympathetic, and didn't hold him in high regard. Paris, if anything, forced him to reconsider. She respected him but never skirted him, and she wasn't smitten by his family name or his complicated past. That pleased him. He respected her independence and passion, and she had her own aspirations. Something had not yet been investigated, but there was a spark there. Although they weren't closely related, there were occasions when it worked to their advantage. Reusing the past was not always necessary for a new beginning. Sometimes it came from someone you hadn't really noticed before, like the person in front of you. People were drawn to Paris because of the warmth and confidence she exuded. Perhaps Liam also wanted someone who wasn't burdened by a lot of baggage. Perhaps it was time to experience something else. Then out of the blue there came Bridget. She was the only woman in his life that he had ever given any real thought to. They had met informally, occasionally at family gatherings and other times on the job. She had a keen sense of intuition, compassion, and intelligence. Having experienced enough heartache herself, she was able to empathize with him without passing judgment. They had recently gotten back in touch after he hurt himself hiking and ended up in the hospital. He had been patched up by her. They had had a few introspective, private talks since then, the kind that linger in your mind for a long time. Comfort was present, but there was no spark in the conventional sense. Respect for one another. Sincerity. And even though it might not seem like fireworks, he might have needed that kind of gradual burn. He was no longer sure what love was meant to look like. He had lost himself in the pendulum of regret and longing, chased the highs and drowned in the lows. However, as he stood here on the precipice, he came to the realization that he didn't need the crushing lows or the dizzying highs. He required equilibrium, stability, someone who viewed him as a man attempting to improve rather than as a project or a tragic character who needed to be saved. As the sun sank, golden light spread across the horizon. He let the warmth to caress his skin while closing his eyes. He heard the faint echo of children laughing somewhere in the distance, either from a recollection or from a nearby beach. He considered Beth. Of Kelly. He was a man who knew how to love, not simply feel, and his girls deserved to witness that. Now each of the women pulled at his mind, and he pictured life with them. Hope's tenderness and common past. Steffi's familiarity and fire. Ivy's playful steadfastness. The new vitality of Paris. Bridget's silent power. There was beauty in every possibility of that future. However, there was only one way to proceed. He didn't have to hurry. He could take his time for once. Allow the solutions to emerge in a calm and clear manner, rather than through drama or panic. He had always been in reaction mode, stuck between want and guilt, and between what other people expected of him. Now, however, he desired to select a peaceful location, to ask who inspired him to become the man he wanted to be, rather than who loved him the most. Without making a final decision, he moved away from the cliff's edge and headed back toward his car with a better plan, intention. Choosing the woman who made the biggest noise in his emotions was not the goal of the quest. It was about picking the person who gave the silence inside it a sense of security. Liam was at last prepared to move forward, whether it meant fostering something new or rekindling something old. As someone who is prepared to give his heart completely, cleanly, honestly, and without apology, rather than as a man caught between two loves. That marked the beginning of a true fresh start.